Hello, my friends. I want to open today's show with a huge thank you to all of the new subscribers, as well as everybody who emailed or messaged me yesterday about the show I posted with no guest. So many of you said you love the news, you love the clips, and from time to time I don't have a guest. You're real happy that the show is there. So I try to post something every day, whether it's just a conversation or whether it's what I call a full show with the clips and the headlines. Either way, the way you've shown your appreciation with your comments, with your subscriptions, with your support means so much to me. It's really inspiring. It makes me feel very motivated to do the work when I see these signs and hear from you this way. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I can't tell you how grateful I am to have your support. And I hope to see you at tonight's Hangout at 8 p.m. East. Okay. Thank you. That's the opening thank you message. Now it's time to start the show. Yay! Stand up. All right, we're officially off if the music has started, and you can buy that song and a whole album worth of originals from John Carroll right now. JONCARROLL.org. Go there and download his new album for just $20. Support John Carroll, who is just one of the best people I know and has been a huge supporter of mine for most of my career in radio, and I just absolutely love the guy. So go support him right now, buy the album, or make a note to do it later. Joining me today, one of the most respected journalists covering national security for over a decade, Spencer Ackerman, is here, and I'm very, very happy to share this conversation with you. That is coming up at 34 minutes. But right now, it's time to get to headlines. It's the news headlines that I've chosen for you. Send me whatever you got. As always, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Here are the ones that I've chosen. I'll get the clips after this, but let's start with news on the trade war. The bad man, our dictator, our authoritarian, our king, announced today that automobile manufacturers would receive a 1-month exemption from tariffs. The tariffs that he unilaterally imposed, of course, 25% on imports from Mexico and Canada. He said he made a decision after speaking with America's 3 largest automakers, whom he pushed to move their production facilities to the U.S. His initial rollout of tariffs also included fees on imports from China, drew pushback from American businesses and roiled financial markets. Stock market, one of the few forces that can convince Trump to change his mind, ended up today 1.1%. Also, the president declined an offer to a reprieve to Canada despite overtures today by the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He said he was not satisfied with Canada's efforts to reduce the flow of fentanyl across the border, even though the U.S. has intercepted just 43 pounds of fentanyl there in all of 2024. Wait, what? 43 pounds of fentanyl are all that has come over in pill form? That's it? That's what this is? That's what he wants to cut down on? That's the first time I'm hearing about that. So I'm just absolutely shocked by that. In Mexico, leaders were frustrated because they believed they'd met all of Trump's demands to avert the tariffs, but he followed through with them anyway because no one has ever been able to trust this guy on any deal that he ever makes. His word means nothing. All right, let's move on to the other big story yesterday. The Supreme Court surprised and ruled against the freeze on foreign aid. This is huge, folks. 5-4 decision released yesterday. They reject Trump's plan to freeze nearly $2 billion in foreign aid as part of his efforts to slash government spending. The majority was formed by 2 conservative justices and all 3 liberals. So Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts, who last night Trump said, "Thank you, I won't forget what you did for me," which if you lived in right-wing conspiracy world, and plenty of people on the left, I'm sure would read right into that. I mean, it seems pretty obvious what he's saying there. The ruling was one of the court's first moves in response to Trump's spending cuts. It suggested that the president will face likely a Supreme Court more skeptical than its most conservative composition might indicate. At least that's the interpretation of the New York Times headline. I don't know what our friend Eric Segall thinks about it, but I will definitely be asking him about it next time I talk to him. I also thought it was an interesting observation that the bar for appearing rational or measured in decision-making has gotten so incredibly low that we're actually excited when the Supreme Court affirms paying bills due to services rendered, because that was the issue here. The work had already been done. The $2 billion of work had already been done, and they tried not to pay for it. So the Supreme Court says you got to pay the bills for the work that was already done. That's how it is being interpreted. Nonetheless, I'll take it. I think that's good news. And we need good news whenever possible, especially when it comes from the Supreme Court, which we never think is going to give us any. So we'll see what happens next. In other news, not good news, in my opinion, the Department of Veteran Affairs is planning to reduce its workforce by more than 80,000 people. That is going to hurt veterans. But go ahead and say that it's all waste, fraud, abuse, and bloated budgets. Just prove it to me. Just tell me where it all is. I'm looking for the evidence. At a hearing yesterday in Washington, House Republicans accused Democratic mayors of New York, Denver, Boston, Chicago of harboring criminal immigrants. The mayors defending their policies. I'll try to find some audio for you on that. And the former mayor of Houston, who became a congressman from Texas in January, died 2 hours after the speech last night. Sylvester Turner died at the age of 20. He was a Democrat, so it doesn't really affect the makeup of Congress, which is the least sensitive take I could have. But I just read that news headline, and so peace and love to the Turner family. I don't know anything about the man. I didn't mean to be disrespectful there, but I did want to mention it. Also saw this. The CIA Director John Ratcliffe, Trump's CIA choice for CIA director, who's a real crank, said yesterday that the U.S. has stopped sharing intelligence with Ukraine after Trump's decision this week to suspend the delivery of military aid to the country. Officials said the pauses were designed to pressure Ukraine to cooperate with Trump's plan to end the war in Russia. Make no mistake, he's not negotiating, Trump. He's not negotiating. He is siding with Russia against Ukraine. I think that's pretty clear in case you hadn't seen. I think that could be the same for the Biden administration when it came to supporting Israel over the Palestinians in that war. Talk about that later. Coming up with the great Spencer Ackerman. Some of U.S. officials, however, suggesting this intelligence sharing pause could be short-lived because if the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, bends the demands of the White House after some prodding and counseling from European leaders, then he might be able to work his way back into Trump's good graces, which has just got to be an unbelievably humiliating thing. But many have done it for their people. We'll see if he does. If Trump continues to withhold U.S. support, the New York Times says it could reorder the battlefield. If Russia sees potential for quick military gains from a weakened Ukraine, the incentive for talks will diminish for Moscow, said the Kiev bureau chief of the New York Times, adding, it's essentially asking Ukraine to agree to terms in advance without knowing what they are. All right, in other news stories, U.S. and Hamas officials held direct talks, breaking with a long-running American policy of refusing to directly engage with the militant group. The U.S. charged a dozen Chinese citizens accused of being part of a sophisticated hacking ring that steals data from Americans. Almost 4,000 campsites in national forests in California could close for part or all of the summer because of staffing shortages, according to a memo out of the California government. In Tesla news, sales in Germany has plunged in February, part of a wider slump across Europe. And in science news, researchers have identified a gene that seems to help slow brain aging in women. But when Trump found out, he buried all of the research and put the researchers in jail, is a headline that you might actually believe. The latter part isn't true. I've been watching this eagle's nest in California, Big Bear. I should include a link. I'll bring it to the hangout tonight. I love it. Zatz told me about it, and I'm watching it. Dr. Zatz, my friend Dr. Zatz, who I hike with every week, who's the wisest, and I love him. And these two eagles, got a webcam. Some of you might watch these. I love them. It's relaxing. It's wondrous. It's amazing. I love nature. I love all things nature. So you're watching them, and they had babies. They had 3 eggs, and 2 have birthed, have hatched, I guess they say. And Zatz told me that now Trump is going to cut the tree that the nest is in down, which I laughed. I thought that was funny because whenever we love something, he seems to try to steal whatever joy we might get out of it. So this eagle nest that we're watching, this miracle of birth and all of it, he's going to cut the tree down. I like that because, I don't like it. I like the joke. Okay, well, let's head over to Steve Bannon, who is one of my favorite bloggers, and he has a bunch of stories I didn't see elsewhere. He says, file this under an important step backward, part 1. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is moving to terminate Pentagon offices and positions that focus on preventing and responding to civilian harm during U.S. combat operations, according to 3 defense officials. Imagine that. There is an office and a position that tries to prevent civilian harm, and Hegseth is getting rid of it. Gross? Appalling? And an important step backward, part 2, Bannon writes, the State Department on Tuesday halted efforts to monitor air quality levels around the world, ending a program that had provided data about a major global health risk. Well, why would you do that? I don't understand why you would do that. I have a lot of questions. And over at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, a new trove of emails unearthed at the federal court reveals chaos unleashed by the Trump administration's abrupt shutdown of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Obama-era agency meant to shield Americans from unfair banking practices. Read that over at Politico. This is actually some pretty good reporting. The employees laid out a long list of consequences, including enforcement actions that have been halted, even though some were subject to court-ordered deadlines, mass termination of contracts that are jeopardizing enormous caches of CFPB data held by third parties, including some public records required to be stored, contracts supporting other legally required work had been canceled and would be difficult to restart. I mean, and that is just the beginning of it. Wow. And stunning information by way of the General Services Administration. The Trump administration yesterday announced that hundreds of federally owned properties are now available for sale, including the headquarters of the Justice Department, Labor Department, and U.S. Census Bureau, an effort that, if carried out, could radically shrink the federal real estate portfolio, have a major impact on the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area and economy. And 17 years after his launch reshaped the political polling landscape, the outlet 538 is being shut down. The last 15 or so employees of the once influential data aggregator are set to be laid off by Disney's ABC News Group, according to Tuesday, report by the Wall Street Journal. The nation's top public health agency, the CDC, says that about 180 employees who were laid off 2 weeks ago can now come back to work. Emails went out yesterday to some CDC probationary employees who got termination notices last month, according to current and former CDC employees. And the subject line read, "Read this email immediately." What a fucking absolute disaster. What a terrible thing that Elon Musk and his Doge idiots, led by Donald Trump, well, he's leading them really, I suppose, have done. I mean, the chaos and consequences seem to be unlimited. It's hard to keep track of them. And finally, the House Speaker Mike Johnson's chief of staff has been arrested on a DUI charge after Trump's speech last night. Hayden Haynes is his name, is one of the most powerful aides in Capitol Hill. He was arrested for driving drunk after his car struck a Capitol vehicle. And, well, I hope that he finds Christ. I'm surprised Christ allowed that. That is a really bad thing. I'm shocked. I'm shocked that that happened. All right. Well, that's all I've got for you in headlines today. I hope you appreciate it. Send me what you're thinking, what is undercovered, what I should be reading each and every day. You can have a huge impact on what I do and what our growing audience hears. So send it over. standupwithpete@gmail.com. All right, now it's time for the clips that I've got for you. So many of you look forward to the clip show part of the show. I was, like I said earlier, very grateful to hear folks reaching out to me and letting me know that they don't mind even when I don't have a guest, as long as I do the news and clips. In the Discord, I saw the chat from Baker Face Spaceman. Wow, a news-only Pete episode was kind of perfect today. It's exactly how much time I had. What'd y'all think? And then Brian Vossler B. Shipper writes, I love the whole show, but I have no problem if he only gets to a portion of it. News, clips, or conversations, it's always good. And my friend Cindy texted me yesterday. Cindy K., many of you know Cindy. She wrote, I just love the clips. Again, you are my hero, my friend, and my good stuff. Cindy, you're mine as well. Let's get to those clips. And a lot of the clips are from congressmen, mostly Democrats, some Republicans here as well. There were oversight hearings, congressional hearings, as well as floor speeches. That's mostly what I've got for you, with a couple of exceptions. But let's start with Congressman Al Green. Stood up last night, shook his walking stick at Trump. Sergeant-at-Arms removed him, per the Speaker, Mike Johnson, whose chief of staff later went out and got drunk. Anyway, here is Al Green yesterday standing up in his own defense after he was censured.
And I did it with intentionality. The president indicated that he had a mandate. I said to the president, you do not have a mandate to cut Medicaid. I have constituents who need Medicaid. They will suffer and some will die if they don't get Medicaid. I heard the speaker when he said that I should cease. I did not, and I did not with intentionality. It was not done out of a burst of emotion. I was emotional about it, but I did it with intentionality. I think that on some questions of conscience, you have to be willing to suffer the consequences. And I have said I will. I will suffer whatever the consequences are, because I don't believe that in the richest country in the world, people should be without good health care. I stood up for my constituents then. I'm standing up for my constituents now. I am grateful to Mr. McGovern for what he has said. I'm grateful to those who have been standing with me. But I will tell you, I appreciate you. No anger. The officers who escorted me out, they were kind to me. I don't blame the speaker for anything. Friends, I would do it again. I have to be candid with you. I'm not trying to in some way insult you. This is a matter of principle. This is a matter of conscience. There are people suffering in this country because they don't have health care. I'll close with this. On some issues that are matters of conscience, it is better to stand alone than not stand at all.
Yeah.
This is where I stand.
Yeah, Congressman Al Green. That was powerful. I like it. That picture of him is going to be iconic, by the way, shaking his cane, whether you appreciated it, thought it was effective or not. I shared that last night because I thought it was a pretty impactful picture. All right, moving on. The mayors of 4 so-called sanctuary cities yesterday, they testified in Washington before a Republican-led House Oversight Committee where they defended their jurisdictions, immigration policies, and treatment of undocumented immigrants. The witnesses included Eric Adams of New York, Mike Johnson of Denver, Brandon Johnson of Chicago, and Michelle Wu of Boston. Mayors are all Democrats and fielded tough questions from Republicans about their city's policies regarding undocumented immigrants. It was an interesting hearing, and it lasted 6 hours. Featured questions from dozens of lawmakers. I just got 2 highlights for you. They both come from Democrats. Well, I should say, this is first Congressman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She is questioning the mayor of the city she represents. The district she represents is in Queens, New York, mostly, I think, so maybe some of Brooklyn as well. And Eric Adams was there, and this is how she handled him. Others asked similar questions, but no one is smarter and more effective than AOC. I thought this was really important and powerful. And I should say it had nothing to do with the issue at hand, sanctuary cities and immigration. Well, it had something to do with it because Eric Adams is getting extorted for a pardon by Trump.
I'd like to start with some questions prior to my recognized questions. Mayor Adams, on January 31st of 2025, your attorneys met with federal prosecutors regarding the charges of bribery, campaign finance fraud, and conspiracy against you. Were you aware of this meeting prior to its occurrence?
Congresswoman,
microphone, please.
I'm sorry. As I stated to your colleagues, and I'm going to continue to state because we're asking the same question over and over again.
This is a new question.
This case is in front of Judge Ho, and out of deference to
I
our
understand,
criminal justice
Mayor Adams.
process, I'm going to
Mayor Adams, as your
to
counsel, I'm sure will inform you. The only permissible way to refuse to answer a question during a congressional proceeding such as this is by pleading the Fifth Amendment. Deference to the judge is not a permissible excuse for not answering questions during a congressional hearing. Is it your intention to plead the Fifth today?
Councilwoman, you said the only way that you can't answer a question is to plead the Fifth. I am answering your question. I'm answering your question directly. That
you are not, Mayor Adams.
Okay, I believe I am.
I will ask it again. Were you aware of the meeting between your attorneys and federal prosecutors on January 31st? Answering this question is a yes or a no.
And I'm going to answer it again. Out of deference to Judge Ho with this case.
That is not an answer, Mayor Adams.
He is going to deal with the outcome of the case.
Mayor Adams, is it your intention to not comply with these questions?
And it went on more like that, and he answered the question similarly to other Democrats questioning him. But now let's get to the issue, and I thought this was great. This is Paul Gosar. He's a Republican. He's batshit crazy. His whole family hates him. He's got a crazy eye and twitch and the whole thing. It's like right out of Central Casting. The guy looks like some kind of creepy redneck murderer, and I'm sorry for all the things I said about him, but now you know who I'm talking about. Anyway, he was questioning the very popular mayor of Boston, and I thought she did a great job in her own defense. Here she is, Michelle Wu and Congressman the crazy Paul Gosar of Arizona.
We're the ones that have that. We just heard we want a comprehensive immigration policy. How can you get a comprehensive immigration policy when you're defining it from the very get-go? You're building it on false premises and false tenets.
Respectfully, Congressman, you could pass bipartisan legislation, and that would be comprehensive immigration law. The false narrative is that immigrants in general are criminals, or immigrants in general cause all sorts of danger and harm. That is actually what is undermining safety in our communities. If you wanted to make us safe, pass gun reforms. Stop cutting Medicaid. Stop cutting cancer research. Stop cutting funds for veterans. That is what will make our city safe.
Yes, thank you. I yield back.
Yeah, I got nothing. I got nothing at all. Yeah, that was awesome. And her answers are absolutely right. Always say that. If you really want to deal with the immigration problem in America, there is no perfect solution, but the best thing you can do is pass laws, comprehensive immigration reform, a whole litany, a list of laws that would make a major, major difference. And so I'm so glad that the mayor of Boston pushed back with that, and that dummy, who you could tell is just crazy just hearing him, had nothing to say. All right, here's Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury of New Mexico, 1st District.
It does not mean that we drag them in front of Congress for 4 hours. We yell at them. We tell them we're going to give them criminal referrals. The DOJ is intimidating our mayors. And my colleagues across the aisle are producing TV ads to try to pretend that they're making this country safe again. It's total bullshit. Absolute bullshit. They are not making America safer again, and what they are doing is terrorizing immigrant families.
And finally, on this issue, from this hearing yesterday, it's Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, our consistent hero.
To touch on something, because I know that many of you prepared for today's hearing by making sure that you got a little bit of information about immigrants and crime in your cities. Let me ask each of the mayors, just yes or no, have any of you been made aware of any immigrant that has had 34 felony convictions that has still been able to roam around in your cities? Anyone?
No, ma'am.
34 felony convictions.
No, Congresswoman.
From the immigrants. Anybody?
I'm not aware.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm just curious because we are so concerned about crime, and I know that my Republican colleagues would never want anybody with 34 felony convictions roaming around because that could be a danger to the community, but I will move on.
Yeah, always great, Jasmine Crockett. I thought this was a pretty good 1 minute or so from Congresswoman Yasamin Ansari, who I haven't heard from. She represents Arizona's 3rd congressional district in Congress. Here she is yesterday at a congressional hearing.
President Trump has talked a big game about how he wants to allegedly make our cities and communities safer. He says he wants to get violent criminals off the streets, and he thinks that mass deportations are the way to do it. He sent ICE and Border Patrol agents after our Native American communities, parents and children, and law-abiding American citizens who are targeted simply because of the color of their skin or the language that they're speaking. The chaos and the fear that this has instilled pits neighbor against neighbor, creates more distrust in law enforcement, and puts us all in danger. Perhaps most disturbing, President Trump has diverted critical Homeland Security investigation agents to work on immigration enforcement. That means they're no longer investigating violent crimes like human trafficking, child pornography, and the flow of fentanyl in our communities, putting our entire country at greater risk. That means fewer violent criminals, pedophiles, and drug runners being apprehended, not more. Once again, Republicans are making life easier for criminals at the expense of victims, actually making our communities less safe. I truly want to thank the mayors for being here and taking on these ridiculous attacks on our local officials. You know what is best for your communities and the people that you represent. You know better than Donald Trump. You know better than Tom Homan. You know better than Stephen Miller.
All right, there you go. I thought that was really good, and I thought this moment was pretty good yesterday as well in a House Oversight hearing between, it opens with this crazy Paul Gosar again, and Congressman Jamie Raskin puts him right in his place with some context. I love it.
Kind of like what I saw on the floor of the House last night. I mean, I love the little popsicle sticks with the little construction paper signs. Those are pretty special. Trying to spend less money. And yeah, save on money. I appreciate you didn't want to be extravagant. I think I'm going to draw a response here, but that's really what we saw on display last night. Sophomoric, childish, not even sophomoric. More juvenile than that. Attempts to disrupt the joint speech. Now I'll yield back. I'm waiting for the...
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. Let me start with the digression to address my friend from Arizona. First of all, I'm delighted that we were able to show you what a nonviolent protest looks like, and I appreciate the fact that you praise people for bringing signs and popsicle sticks rather than steel pipes and Confederate battle flags and Trump flags to beat people up.
There you have it. Oh, he's so good, Raskin. You know, another great performer and policymaker is James McGovern, who I know and love. Here he is yesterday on the House floor.
And now, Mr. Speaker, Republicans have the nerve to come down here and censure anyone. Republicans moved heaven and earth to come down here and defend the honor of their boss, Donald Trump. But they won't lift a finger for their own constituents. Look in the mirror and censor yourselves. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president.
Oh, okay. So they shouldn't say anything negative about the president. Good luck with that. More from Congressman McGovern, please.
There was a breach of dignity and decorum in this chamber last night. But it wasn't Al Green. It was the President of the United States who stood at that podium and delivered a manifesto of pure fantasy. He says he wants to make America affordable again. Well, inflation just hit a 7-month high, and his new trade war will cost families $2,000 more a year. Trump says he wants to balance the budget. His plan would add $3 trillion to the deficit to give billionaires another tax cut. Let me repeat that again. To give billionaires a tax cut. All these cutbacks, all these firings are going to fund tax cuts for billionaires. He says Social Security is paying benefits to millions of people over 100 years old. Totally wrong. Debunked 100 times. He says he cares about childhood cancer. He slashed the funding for child cancer research. He says his tariffs are good for farmers. Last time he did this, farmers lost $27 billion. He says he supports law enforcement. He pardoned the people who beat police officers on January 6th. He pardoned them. People who tried to overturn the election. People who brutally beat the men and women who protect us in this chamber every single day. Just one outrageous statement after another, and not a single peep from my Republican friends, nothing. And now, Mr. Speaker, Republicans have the nerve to come down here and censure anyone.
And finally, one more clip. This is McGovern's clapback to a Republican's comments.
In my career here, I have never, ever seen a member of Congress escorted from the floor of the House by the Sergeant-at-Arms. It's never happened in my career. And I don't want to see it happen again. With that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Well, you know what's never happened in my career? A President of the United States coming before a joint session of Congress and insulting members by name individually, shouting slurs at people. I've never seen that before. I mean, maybe would the gentleman agree with me that Trump deserves a censure for calling my senator from Massachusetts a slur? Would that be appropriate?
Thank you very much. That's the thing that pissed me off probably the most from the speech from our tyrant president the other night when he calls Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas during his speech. It was just embarrassing, horrific. And here's more on that from the governor and former VP candidate Tim Walz.
The idea of a president standing at that rostrum and throwing a slur at a United States senator in the middle because you disagree on policy is absolutely ridiculous. So I think the issue here is the American public knows that. They can think they're cheering in there, but they're not interested in going back and holding their town halls when people are saying, why these tariffs are going to destroy us in farm country. Why are you putting these on? Why are you firing 80,000 people at the VA when it's difficult to get an appointment and get in? We have those responsibilities. So look, it was what I expected. It was reality TV. It was for consumption for those, the folks who are going to line up there, the Republican senators and House members, who I'm deeply disappointed in, not speaking up. They know that's not the right thing to do, and they know there are no policies there that really make a difference. So, yeah, frustrating.
You know what's frustrating is all of the lies coming from the White House and Republicans about Canada, just making shit up all the time. Here's Peter Navarro on Fox News saying Canada has been taken over by Mexican drug cartels.
Sabers, but I don't want to contribute to that. What I want to say to every world leader who gets up in arms when all we're asking for is fairness and to have them stop killing our people is, please listen to us. Canada could do a lot more. Canada has been taken over, Brett, by Mexican cartels. They bring up these pill presses and printers and the medicines that they fake. You can't tell the difference.
Yeah, okay, all right. This is just preposterous. Probably shouldn't have even played that one. Don't want to spread the lies, but I do want to point out, you just make whatever you want up. I mean, just how do you defend against that? How do you react to that? You never saw that coming. I mean, it's just crazy. That guy needs to go back to jail where he wasn't so, talking. He's back in the White House. The guy was in jail, and now he's back in the administration. It's unbelievable. I guess that's a virtue if you work in the Trump administration. Yeah, serve any jail time? Yes? Oh, great. Come on in. All right, well, the final clip I've got for you should make you laugh. It's Jimmy Kimmel on Jimmy Kimmel Live last night on ABC.
This year for Lent, we are giving up democracy here in this country. Last night, Donald Trump addressed the nation. I don't know if you heard, but he's president again. And I was surprised, too. But he spoke for 99 minutes last night with no intermission. It was the longest presidential address in more than 60 years. Why is it that the orchestra can play off an Oscar winner, but not the president? Trump's speech went on so long. His speech was 10 minutes longer than The Lion King. True. And had twice as much lion in it. So I was reading this morning. Do you know how many times Trump lied during his speech last night? 11 million. 3 fact checkers died adding it up. Not everyone was a fan of the King's speech. One gentleman on social media, I think summed it up pretty well. He wrote, "That may be the angriest, least compassionate, and worst State of the Union speech ever made. It was an embarrassment to our country." Oh, wait, that was what Trump wrote about Biden's speech last year. Well, he topped it. There was plenty of Biden bashing last night. Trump said Biden was the worst president in history. He blamed him for the price of eggs. He said a lot of crazy stuff, but this is one that really stood out for me as he pretended to be concerned about cutting costs and rooting out fraud and all this. He made the claim that under Biden, the federal government was spending $8 million on this.
$8 million for making mice transgender. This is real.
No, it's not. You hear the president of the United States say we're spending $8 million to do sex change operations on mice. You say, well, I'm sure he's exaggerating, but there must be something there. Turns out there's not. It's not real. The government spent money on transgenic mice, which are genetically modified mice they use in lab tests to study disease. It has nothing to do with being transgender other than the trans part of the word. You think they know this and just ignore it, or are they so dumb they don't know how to Google? Or maybe they think we're so dumb we don't know how to Google. I don't know. They're turning Mickeys into Minnies and Minnies into Mickeys. No, they're just trying to cure dementia and heart disease, which you would think Trump would be for, seeing as how they are both coming for him real soon.
All right. There you go. Kimmel last night. Those are the clips. Those are the headlines. And that is the opening of the show. Now it's time to get to my great guest, Spencer Ackerman, who is one of the most respected national security journalists in the country. I've been following his work for years. I love reading this stuff. His book, Reign of Terror, How the 9/11 Era Destabilized America and Produced Trump, is really important, really illustrative, and he is a Pulitzer Prize winner for public service journalism for the Edward Snowden surveillance revelations. He writes at Forever Wars, forever-wars.com. He also writes an Iron Man comic book. So he's a fascinating guy, super smart. Unfortunately, this interview is not technically sound. I am so sorry for this. I tried everything to fix it, but I couldn't get his local feed to upload, and he didn't get back to me last night late enough or yet, so I was unable to get to fix it. So there's a lot of bleeps and blurps in this interview, and for that I apologize. I almost didn't post it, but he's such a great interview and says such important things that I wanted to include as much of it as I could. So I'm very sorry about that, and I feel bad about it, and hopefully it's worth it, because talking to him certainly was. My conversation right now with the great Spencer Ackerman. I hope you like it. There he is. Spencer, thank you very much for joining me again. Your reporting continues to be vital and important, and I'm so glad you're out there doing it. Happy to have you.
Thanks, Pete. How are you?
Good. Tired and cranky, like the rest of us. But I want to ask you about specifically your work and all that you're working on, because you are a writer for the Iron Man comic book series, which must be a childhood dream. And I just want to know what exactly you're doing over there for many of us who still read comic books. And how did you get that gig? What, amongst other things you're doing?
I guess I'm staking a claim for a certain kind of Disney adult that doesn't want to admit it's a Disney adult. A whole lot of themes of my reporting on national security are going to come through in this Iron Man comic. Currently, we're about to see what national security looks like in a world ruled by Dr. Doom, and Iron Man is going to play a pretty significant role in that. So if that's something that appeals to listeners of this podcast who probably thought they were tuning in for current events, join us over there.
Yeah, no, we definitely have a lot of comic book fans, specifically Iron Man. That's a pretty exciting gig. I'm really psyched to see whatever you come up with, because you include a lot of reality references in there, it's fair to say.
That's right.
And you even will potentially in the future throw in a reference to Zelensky.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if they'll let me do that, but there's a moment in Iron Man number 5, currently out at fine comic book stores everywhere, to a character who the United States had previously overthrown, mentioning this history and putting herself in the category of other former U.S. clients who the United States later saw fit to depose. And the line is, like Saddam, like Mubarak, like DM. And for the I wrote that a couple months ago, and it just came out right before the Trump-Zelensky meeting. So I mentioned that maybe for the collected edition, I'll see if I can have Marvel throw in a like Zelensky in there.
I love it. I love all of it. I want to get your take on many of the issues that you've been writing about. And I thought of you just because of all of your work and your history when I saw Trump's Gaza resort ad that he reshared. Because what I thought about was how the entire, quote, war on terror was being fought. We were always thoughtful about how we would inflame people, how we would upset people, and what was good strategy, what was bad. Obviously, torturing people ends up not working to get information and becomes the greatest recruiting tool that could ever be imagined. So when I saw this video that he reshared, I thought, I can't think of anything worse that we could ever have done than the president's comments on Gaza, the future of Gaza, and sharing this ad in terms of a recruiting tool. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what this kind of behavior and rhetoric and action, before even action, means for Gaza, for the Middle East, and many of the people that you've been writing about for years.
One thing I would say is that the recruiting tool isn't tasteless AI ad. The recruiting tool is the Biden administration facilitating the Israeli genocide of Palestine, and the Trump administration looking to complete that with his ethnic cleansing proposal. The AI thing itself was the rotten cherry on the shit sundae. I don't think we should look outside of the material reality that drives the quote unquote recruitment. Whatever we want to say about recruitment, the point is that there will be resistance to what the United States and Israel are doing. The agony of 2 years nearly, not 2 years, what am I even saying? What is time anymore? A year and a half of a genocide that has slid so seamlessly into a regional war, that is not something that the Middle East is going to forget. That's not something the region will move or hive off or view with distinction, the distinctions that we in the United States might wish them to see, that it was Trump who made it worse. No, they won't see that. They see an unbroken chain across decades of American facilitation of the 75-year Nakba that the Israelis have instituted upon the Palestinians, of violent culling and an ethnic cleansing that has taken place across generations. They will not see a distinction between an American and an Israeli action once it is American weaponry being used by the Israelis to kill Palestinians. Whatever else we want to say about a tasteless and truly disgusting, I don't want to diminish the disgusting propagandistic element of Donald Trump stunning his toes on the Al-Rashid beach road in Gaza. This was, if anything, a joyous celebration of the idea of completing a genocide. The whole thing itself is what will spur the resistance to it. Let's not make the mistake of thinking that a particular media event substitutes for the physical devastation of Gaza in the imaginations of everyone who has watched it and everyone whose families have agonizingly had to find a way to survive it.
Let's talk more about that video. I'm kidding. Give me your thoughts on the legacy of the Biden administration vis-a-vis the war in Gaza and what you refer to as a genocide. What I think can only be referred to as a genocide. I don't know how you can defend it if you look it up, and much of the world has, but regardless of how people want to define it, I want to get your take on kind of the epitaph of the Biden administration, his State Department. They were negotiating for years on this, it would seem, constantly going back and forth. And what will history say about the Biden administration and its support for Israel's horrific war and destruction of Gaza?
I don't think there will be much of a legacy of the Biden administration beyond it. One of the things that I remember when I was writing my book, Reign of Terror, How the 9/11 Era Destabilized America and Produced Trump, was interviewing Ben Rhodes, the former leftmost Barack Obama foreign policy advisor. And I was there to interview him about Obama's contribution to the war on terror and how I understood that as really the core of the Obama foreign policy legacy. Understandably, he resisted that and pointed to the Obama administration's legitimate achievements for opening up Cuba and for negotiating the nuclear deal with Iran. And I recognize those as achievements as well. However, by the time we were speaking, the Trump administration had undone all of that. Right. And what it retained was the Obama infrastructure of counterterrorism, and would quickly see how it could use that structure to its purposes. Same thing about the Biden administration. We will, if anyone had valorized Joe Biden's record, for instance, on Ukraine, Donald Trump is in the process of destroying and reversing it. Right. We will see that on other aspects of Biden's tenure, not just foreign, but domestically as well. What will remain will be the facilitation of a genocide. That will be what, after all of the Biden administration's other works are washed away by the current and perhaps even future administration, we will have seen the glide path from what Biden did with Israel and Palestine and what Trump did. And I'm sure there will be other things somewhere along the line, another way that I would imagine the Biden administration's foreign policy will live on and truly cement a legacy that survives Trump beyond Israel and Gaza, will be in setting up a new Cold War against China, which was as much a Biden policy as it was an inheritance of the Trump legacy from the first term, now to be supercharged with the second and subsequent ones. Those bellicose, extractive, bloody, and futile aspects of the Biden administration's foreign policy, I expect to live beyond and cement its legacy from East Asia to West Asia.
Also,
I'll just say one more thing about that. There will probably be Americans who listen to this and consider that too harsh an assessment. And I would encourage them to look at how the world beyond the West understands U.S. foreign policy, understands what they've just lived through under Biden and what they're currently living through under Trump. And I think that will take away of the filters that many of us in the United States wish to understand U.S. foreign policy and its impacts on the world.
Really important point. It's now more than ever to read foreign media. I think that the last time I read European media this much was during the war in Iraq, and then perspectives on Afghanistan as well. But I've found myself reading a lot of European journalism lately, and I think it's as vital as ever. Talking just real quick on, I saw yesterday reports that there was an emergency meeting between Arab states, stakeholders, Egypt, and I think Jordan, and I don't know what other Gulf states were involved, whatever. But they basically talked about a plan to rebuild
Qatar
Gaza.
is usually the main intermediary, yeah.
Yeah. They were talking about some billions of dollars to rebuild Gaza. But then I'm reading Forever Wars, where you write, and you reference Antony Blinken towards the end there, I think the final weeks, talking about Hamas is almost back to the strength that it was. And so I don't know what to think. I don't know who to believe or how to you report those types of things out necessarily. But just the question to you is, at the end of all this death and destruction, what is the strength of Hamas? What was the achievement from the Israeli standpoint, if anything?
The achievement from the Israeli standpoint is getting as many Palestinians dead or off of land that the Israelis covet as possible. Hamas is not the issue. Hamas won't be the issue. There will be something, as I want to come back to the question of after all of this in a moment, sure. But just taking it as read for a second, the conditions like this produced Hamas. They will produce a subsequent organization that will be as willing to kill Israelis as Hamas was, and perhaps beyond. Its capabilities will be what its capabilities will be. But as long as there is an occupation of Palestinian land and apartheid for people upon it, violent resistance is guaranteed to that, because the Palestinians will not lay down and die. As long as the Israelis continue to obstruct the emergence of a Palestinian state, that is to say, we talk about this kind of dryly often, but it means simply the freedom of the millions of Palestinians on their own land, a violent resistance is guaranteed and foreordained. And while that resistance will make its own choices about how it treats human life, the structural conditions shaping it are the ones controlled by the Israelis and guaranteed by the United States of America. And that's an unfortunate truth that a tremendous amount of media on this genocide has decided to obscure. You asked me about on the other side of this, what is at the end of this? I don't think we have the luxury of casting out what that is, because no one is on the other side of this. There is no end of this in sight. The end of this has to be one that the United States imposes upon the Israelis, and accordingly has to be one that the left imposes upon the United States. And very weak left right now. I am not sure how worthwhile it is to cast any viewpoint on what the end of something is when we are not forcing an end to exist. There could be an end right now, because the Israelis are on the precipice of formally stepping outside of the ceasefire. They violated that ceasefire several times, several different occasions. It is very typical throughout Israeli history with the Palestinians. and as well with Hezbollah in Lebanon. But more importantly, or I should say more immediately, the Israelis, as they have signaled since June of 2024, are not willing to proceed toward what's called phase 2 of the current ceasefire that the Trump administration, rather rightfully, unfortunately from the Biden perspective to say, took credit for getting Israelis to approve. It looks instead like the Israelis agreed to a second phase, the phase in which they would have to negotiate a permanent end to the conflict. Or I shouldn't say that. I should say a lasting ceasefire and withdrawal from Gaza, military withdrawal from Gaza. But it appears to not wish to do that. And you can see very clearly from the way the right in the Israeli coalition is flexing its muscle that it wishes to not give Netanyahu the ability to agree to it, even were Netanyahu inclined. Accordingly, we are looking back right now, nearly a week in, on an Israeli decision to besiege Gaza completely and allow none of the truck of life-giving and life-sustaining supplies that are waiting across the Rafah Gate in Egypt to enter. There is no way of understanding that except as collective punishment, a continuation of a genocidal activity. The United States seems to have moved past the kind of crocodile tears stage of the Biden administration, in which it was pledging that it was doing all it could to get the Israelis to agree, while not using its actual material leverage of withholding arms shipments, without which the Israeli military cannot function by its own admission. And instead, the Biden administration kept those arms shipments, with one exception, running all throughout. And the Trump administration, as we saw right as the ceasefire was about to expire, approved a new shipment of weapons into Israel. So right now we are seeing a very ominous and dangerous circumstance for 2025 in which the Israelis believe they can get away with a tremendous amount of advancement of a project of ethnic cleansing, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank as well.
It would seem there's nothing in place to stop them in any international agency or coalition, much less the U.S. I can't imagine.
I would simply say that's a matter of political choice. It is simply not the case that the U.S. lacks leverage. It has all of the leverage conceivable in the ways that the United States, both militarily and politically, backstops the Israelis. It is choosing not to do that. The United States is choosing not to do that.
To be clear, both the Biden administration, but I think there's even more of a green light. There are not even any crocodile tears, it would seem. That's what I meant. There's nothing to stop them, meaning the Trump administration is not concerned. Do whatever you want, it would seem. I don't know.
It would seem, yes.
Okay, so let me ask you then about this recent reporting that you've got over at Zeteo, where you are a contributor. I love that outlet. People should subscribe over there. You can support Spencer and many other great journalists on what Elon Musk and Doge are doing and what they might be getting access to. How is your reporting just quickly changing? You've always had sources inside the government, outside the government that reach out to you because you're a well-respected journalist and known with a lot of credibility. So people reach out to you sometimes without even being you inquiring about them. But I'm sure, and I know for this reporting, you've heard from lots of folks. So the alarm bells seem to be ringing on an issue that, Spencer, is pretty boring to try to read and understand, but probably as important as anything else that you've reported in many ways.
Yeah, this is something that's a dry one, and it's also one that I cannot confirm that Doge currently has access to. But sources of mine, particularly in the State Department, several weeks ago became extremely agitated that the master list of U.S. defense items, that's anything militarily relevant, not just hardware, but software as well, for export onto the global market was going to be accessed by Doge, that affiliates and allies of Doge had arrived within relevant portions of the State Department to this list. This list is called U.S. Export, or shortened to USX. And basically what it is, anything that the State Department approves can be sold overseas to military markets. Extremely sensitive Quint. This also covers within this database called X. The regulators can see all of it, both the material itself with all of its proprietary intellectual property, that is to say, the specifications to which for hardware it is machined, for software it is coded, and then for the contracts that have lots of non-public elements to them about deliverables and dates for all of that. All of this material is material from, in his SpaceX incarnation, Elon Musk's competitors. So basically, the rest of the U.S. military-industrial complex, the stuff that they sell overseas, all of that is in there, along with delivery dates and along with pricing material. All of this, from a regulatory perspective, if shifted into a commercial, if shifted over to one of the participants in that export process, all of a sudden they have an enormous advantage over all of their competitors. One of the people familiar with this database, who used to work for the State Department, told me that it is the most intelligence they could imagine a defense competitor possessing. It's also material that contains relevant specifications on competitor items that are sold to the U.S. military itself, because some of these items are both exported abroad and sold here in the United States. Like you can imagine, any rocket contract, any launch vehicle, what it looks like, the dates upon which competitors, whether it's Lockheed or any other, have to deliver them. All of that is contained in this one centralized database that's supposed to be available only to regulators, and my sources were extremely worried it may come to DOJ very soon or already enter into DOJ possession. Neither the State Department nor the Defense Department would confirm any of that to me, nor answer questions about DOJ's access to the offices that oversee that database.
And really important reporting. I'm sure you'll stay on that story. Hopefully, the more people repeat it, the more people that will reach out to you. Maybe at some point you'll get some response. Before I let you go, I want to ask you about your new book and your recent trip reporting to Jakarta, Indonesia. Your new book is called The Torture and Deliverance of Majid Khan, and you've just come back from a reporting trip. You talked to victims of terrorist attacks there. It looks fascinating, Spencer. Congratulations. I'm really looking forward to reading it, as I always am, all of your reporting and work. But tell us here at the end a little bit about this book.
Sure. Thank you. The book won't be out until 2026. I haven't finished writing it yet, but it's about one of the people that the United States tortured the worst after 9/11, someone who spent more than 2 agonizing years of torture in the CIA unofficial prisons known as the black sites, and then lived for over 15 years in a cage in Guantanamo Bay before beating every conceivable odd and finally getting out in 2023. And the way he got out in 2023 was by agreeing as an act of repentance to offer cooperation and testimony in the military commission of the 9/11 detainees, including his former boss, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And the need for the act of repentance in Majid's eyes was because of the act that he committed, that while not directly an act of violence, he never committed a direct act of violence. Nevertheless, he couriered money to an outlet that would ultimately use it for a bombing in August of 2003, unbeknownst to Majid, in Jakarta, Indonesia, that killed 15 people and wounded scores more. And I went to Jakarta last week to talk with survivors of that bombing, reconstruct what that bombing was, and look at what their lives were in the 20 years afterward and how that day of horror impacted the rest of their lives. And that's coming in this book, The Torture and Deliverance of Majid Khan, in 2026 from Penguin Press.
That's really exciting. And as I am with all of your reporting, it's been too long since I've talked to you, but I really appreciate you doing this with me today. And I hope everybody will subscribe to Forever Wars, get your books, which the last one's still so relevant, obviously, and read you over at Zeteo as well. Spencer, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks very much, Pete.
All right, there you go. Spencer Ackerman. Go subscribe to Forever Wars. There's a link in the show notes. Read Iron Man, get his books, and follow him on all the social media. Love talking to him. Sorry about the internet blips. Hopefully it wasn't too annoying, too bad. Tolerable. I tried to edit them as much as I could. And thank you for joining me today. Go tell Spencer thank you, because that matters a lot on social media. So go let him know that you heard him here on the show. Write a rating review for it. Go buy John Carroll's album. I hope to see you at tonight's hangout. Get tickets for PODJAM and find your peace and your joy. Don't let them take it from you. Listen to the right wolf. Be the change you want to see. And I will talk to you tonight, if not tomorrow. All right. Love you. Bye-bye.